Newsfirst, NEWSLINE with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to NEWSLINE Prime. We're live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo, and this evening we are going to be discussing standards in Parliament, and we've got none other than former Director of Administration, the Parliament of Sri Lanka, Mr. Lacille de Silva. No stranger to the program, but here he is, right here. Very good evening to you,
Good
Lacille.
evening to you, Faraz. Good evening.
And Lacille, I asked you on this program because very specifically I wanted to discuss standards. I was going to say that there are no standards, or there doesn't appear to be standards by the greater majority of our members in Sri Lanka's Parliament. 72 years nearly of independence,
yeah.
And we are still struggling with standards. Democracy, of course, not very easy. We know that, and we had John F. Kennedy to remind us about that. But what about standards? Tell us about what the British Parliament did back in 1994.
Yeah, in 1990s, there had been various reports that standards had fallen. There were a lot of deficiencies found in the handling of finances. And actually, I brought a report today to tell you basically how it originated, right? Mm-hmm. This was a report published by the Public Accounts Committee in UK. And I must tell you, there's a Public Accounts Committee even here in Sri Lanka. There is also another one, Committee on Public Enterprises. Now, this one basically highlighted various deficiencies that are there in the system, in the entire government machinery. And I think it will be relevant to quote a few things, because then we will be, in recent years we have seen and reported on a number of serious failures in the administrative and the financial systems and controls within departments and other public bodies. It says we emphasize that we are not calling for any more detailed rules. Almost every case we have examined involved breaches of existing rules or guidance. But detailed rules must be set in framework in which those to whom authority is delegated are told to unambiguous terms the scope and limits of the delegation. And actually they eventually, there was another issue where the media took up the position. Some members have been bribed in order to take up certain issues by way of questions and other...
Cash for questions.
Cash for questions, you're right?
And there was a company, a firm of lobbyists at the center.
Right.
And they had a prime client in Muhammad Al-Fayed.
That's correct, right? On that basis, there was a huge cry, the media, that there should be standards introduced to Parliament, and the then Prime Minister John Major took a decision that Judge Michael Nolan was given a task, to study the whole process, and eventually he studied the whole thing, and he submitted a report, which is again a summary of the Nolan Committee's first report on standards in public life, right? And there it says, at the request of the Prime Minister, the Nolan Committee has spent 6 months inquiring into the standards in British public life. We have concentrated on members of Parliament, ministers, civil servants, executives, and the entire system. Eventually, he introduced, now, as you said, 7 principles. The 7 principles of public life apply to anyone who works as a public office holder. This includes all those who are elected or appointed all throughout the public sector, everywhere in the government. Now, these are the 7 things: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, leadership. On that,
let's look at the Nolan principles. The first, let's see. What is the first item? It's selflessness, is it?
Yeah, selflessness.
Yeah.
That is, holders of public office should act solely in terms of the public interest.
Right.
Then integrity, it says they should not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, their family or their friends. They must declare and resolve any interest and relationships. Like that, all the, do you want me to explain all the 7?
Well, let's take one by one, shall we? The first of those is selflessness. And of course, the selflessness says that holders of public office should act solely in terms of the public interest.
Yes, correct.
Now, let's go on to the second one. Integrity. Integrity. Holders of public office must avoid placing themselves under any obligation to people that may try inappropriately to influence them in their work. They should not act or take decisions to gain financial or other material benefit for themselves, their family, or their friends. They must declare and resolve any interest and relationships. That is under integrity. Now, with these two things, with selflessness and integrity, I'm unable to apply any of these, just these two principles, to several departures from due procedure or departures from due process that has taken place in the last 4.5 years.
Yeah, this goes back, for the last couple of decades. It is so very unfortunate because integrity, morality, all that is a big problem in this country. Now, in countries like Sri Lanka, we have all over the world, especially in the House of Commons, where they have introduced all these things. Unfortunately, why can't we think of implanting all that, right? Now, this government gave an assurance that they will introduce a code of ethics, and that was eventually done. That also speaks a lot about integrity, all that, right?
Well, let's, before we showed you the report from the House of Commons, which is the proper conduct of public business report by the Committee of Public Accounts of the House of Commons in London. We don't have to travel that far. In Sri Lanka too, we have the Code of Conduct for members of Parliament. And here we have it, and I think you can see, this is a little booklet, and it's quite thick because it's in all 3 languages, just in case somebody doesn't understand it. Mrs. Sumandaran wanted one of those presidential commission reports in Tamil because presumably he wanted it for what? To read it, I suppose. Not that he can't read English. Still, here you are. This is the Code of Conduct for members of Parliament in Sri Lanka's Parliament. So, Mr. Lacille Silva, we've got everything, like much else in Sri Lanka, even the laws and the regulations, the due process and the procedure, it's all in place. We have the Bribery Commission set up many years ago in the rule where SWRD Bandaranaike was the Prime Minister.
Yeah, the Bribery Act was passed in 1954.
Sadly, apart from about 3 or 4 people who were forced to resign from politics, not just go back and sit in the back benches, SWRD Bandaranaike forced them out of the way with the promise that he would prosecute them if they didn't so give up their positions.
Correct, yes.
Now, since then, either things have been terribly good and there's been no need for anyone to resign, or nepotism, political patronage, family bandism has all taken its toll, and they've really got hold in Sri Lanka. Which do you think it is? Have they been so good that they haven't broken anything, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, now, can we say this way now? SWRD Bandaranaike was, being one of the very early stages, in the early stages, thought they should not allow, say, corruption, bribery, all that. That is the reason why he took a firm step, and they did not like, this becoming a cancer. It was unfortunate in 1994, his daughter, you know, as the President Chandrika introduced the bribery commission. That again was a huge step in that direction. But the problem now, in those countries like England, right, they have introduced all that, and having introduced the Nolan Commission, thereafter they took a step forward. Then they created a committee on standards in public life. Actually, the committee, the scope was to make recommendations to improve standards of behavior of public life, right? On that basis, continuously they go on. And it came to a stage, the Nolan Commission report eventually at different stages were modified, right? In 2009, really, they introduced a law. So naturally, all those steps are being taken. But unfortunate situation is, even if they introduce laws, unfortunately, those laws are not being enforced.
They're not being implemented.
They're not being implemented.
On
right?
Newsline, we encourage you to send us your questions. Please send us your questions by SMS on 0772 300 305. The number is coming up on your screen. And let's look at the next card in our quest to look at the 7 aspects of the Nolan principles. Item number 3 on the screen would be objectivity. Objectivity would be, as it is defined here, holders of public office must act and take decisions impartially, fairly, and on merit, using the best evidence and without discrimination or bias. How objective are politicians in Sri Lanka?
It is unfortunate they are not objective at all. They have disregarded all that. Now see, it says public officers must act and take decisions impartially, fairly, and on merit, right? And unfortunate situation here in Sri Lanka is, when it comes to, say, allocation of funds, there have been monies allocated. Say they have probably invested money for unnecessary projects, and they have wasted money. And I know, for all purposes, you know, there are instances, there are areas where you don't have facilities. Schools will say, some schools don't have desks, some schools don't have, you know, lavatories, and
some schools don't have power.
Power, right? Unfortunate situation. It has come to a big difficult situation, because now we have even borrowed, we have invested, but all those monies have been invested without looking at the returns, right? So naturally, when you have to think of accountability, right, there has to be other requirements that has to be considered. The most important thing is now value for money. All that monies have been wasted, right? Objectivity is not there. It is unfortunate the people have to carry the burden. Now, at this moment, there are again situations where people have no hope whatsoever. At the moment, people are so desperate because they have not even invested money. Objectivity, all that is no longer visible.
How about accountability? It's the next item of the Nolan principles, which is accountability. I'm sure they'll put it up on the screen now.
Yeah.
Accountability. Holders of public office are accountable to the public for their decisions and actions, and must submit themselves to the scrutiny necessary to ensure this. So surely this is where the issue about publishing your asset and liabilities declaration.
Yeah.
Surely if you want to be accountable to the public and to show a good faith, then why not hold yourself up, accountable, and you say, look, this is my assets declaration, and I'm proud to put it online for everyone, for the world and his dog to have a look at it. Do you think that I'm living in some utopian world? Only 6 members of Parliament have given their asset declarations and made them public.
Yeah.
Made them public.
There is a law which compels you to provide every year the declaration of assets, right? But when it comes to that, even there, the law is not being implemented and there have been instances where some people have been taken to courts for not furnishing all that. Now, accountability is one issue. We will say we have enough laws in this country as to how to handle public finances with probity and in the interest of the public, right? Now, when it comes to issues where monies have been expended or at least invested, right, regularity, in the sense you have to know that the money that you have got have been spent for the purpose and none other than nothing else, right?
Now, Mr. Lacille, tell me, it says here that under accountability, it says here, they must submit themselves to the scrutiny necessary to ensure accountability.
Yeah.
But when, I'm relating all this to several different events. Now, when Lakshman Kirialla was having his meetings with the bidders under a published tender scheme in his office without so much as his ministry secretary being there, his political secretary was there. But when the media turned around and asked him, well, you know, about this, all he could do was, he said, well, you know, I've got 400 million in the bank or in assets or whatever it is. I don't need to dip into the pie, so to speak. Well, if you can make a statement like that, Lacille, how much further is it for him to travel to say, do you know what, I'm going to make it public. You guys can dissect it if you want. How much longer between that and this?
Yeah, but you know, a responsible person, a minister, a politician particularly, and a person who has been elected by the general public, right? I think for all purposes they are accountable, because now, you know stories where in Sri Lanka there had been number of cases. Now, a minister who was from down south was brought before the Bribery Commission because it was stated that he had accumulated so much of wealth within a particular very short period.
Right.
Naturally, they amass so much of wealth because, you know, rules, all that is broken down in order to...
There was a departure from due process.
Due process, right?
Right.
So naturally, I think the system is wrong. Now, I wrote an article long time ago.
The system stinks, that sounds.
Yeah, the system stinks, really. Now, for all purposes, now, like what we started originally, there are rules, there are laws, there are regulations, but nothing is being implemented.
Now,
right?
I'm about to warn our listeners and you, Lacille, that my next question from the quoting from the Nolan principles is likely to make everybody reach for the box of tissues, because they were going to be laughing tears at the whole irony of it all. So the Nolan principles, the next point, and it's coming up on your screen now, is honesty.
Honesty, yeah.
Holders of public office should be truthful.
Yeah.
What about that then? Can you apply that to any major scheme, major statement of this, or major achievement of this government?
No, the basic requirement of a public officer, whether he is an elected person, elected authority, a person who has been elected by the people, or a person in the public sector, right?
Yeah.
They all need to be honest. Unfortunately, again, there has been all types of issues due to dishonesty, right? Now,
and what about openness then? Holders of public office should act and take decisions in an open and transparent manner. Information should not be withheld from the public unless there are clear and lawful reasons for so doing. Now, this is what I mean. Under openness, the ministers and those responsible officials who are being accused by the people, by the media, by anybody, instead of hiding behind legal niceties, what's so wrong if in them not being open and saying, look, here's my declarations, here's the real story. Why can't they do that?
They don't do that now.
Why? What do they got? Do you think they've got something to hide?
Yeah, there is a lot to hide, and at the same time they have been, they introduced the Information Act, right?
Yeah.
There are instances where they have even not furnished what is important, what has been requested by the masses, right? So naturally, it is the public who pays them, and it is their money that is spent on them, right? So naturally, there is a right on the part of the people to ask for all those expenditure and details on all that, right? The problem is it doesn't happen. Now, openness is not there. There are places where they prefer. Now, I remember just a couple of days ago, there was an issue you mentioned about the Minister Kriale, right?
Yeah.
He had apparently sent, his secretary had sent a list of names of some 45 or something, to be appointed, that all that came before the commission.
Yeah.
Frauds and Corruption Commission newly appointed, right? Now, until you go there, until you get exposed, right, there are instances where they don't, I mean, even on the information, under the Information Act, there are instances where they refuse, right? It is not the right thing to do. You are bound to give all that information under the Information Act because it has been there even in other countries, right?
Yeah.
It was introduced to maintain democracy. In a democratic country, it is very important to do it that way.
Well, the last of the Nolan principles, but certainly not the least, is something called, and it'll come up on your screen now, and it's called leadership. It's called leadership. Now, what do you think seriously that we have leadership amongst our legislators?
I don't think there is leadership at all. Now, countries like Singapore,
Yeah.
we always quote that leaders of the caliber of Lee Kuan Yew
Yeah.
was able to lift the country up, because that was also a country.
But under leadership, it says holders of public office should exhibit these principles in their own behavior.
Yeah.
They should actively promote and robustly challenge or robustly support the principles and be willing to challenge poor behavior wherever it occurs.
Yeah, now holders of public office should exhibit these principles in their own behavior. They should actively promote and robustly support. Now, sorry, our leaders have not been able to, exhibit that kind of leadership qualities. They have always, when it comes to public issues, right, not been able to promise where they could lead the country and develop all that to take the country forward, because in my own way it is due to lack of leadership qualities. It is very important leaders need to be more proactively doing all that for the benefit of the people. Leaders have not done all that because, like what they said at the very beginning,
Yeah.
they were not selflessness.
Right.
I mean, that was not there. They wanted just probably to look after themselves. And what happened? Eventually, it has come to a situation they have not done what needs to be done as good leaders in a country where, because we had a country since independence, it was a lot better and we enjoyed better facilities even at the time of, say.
Shall we listen to this very short clip from that country that several Sri Lankan politicians would like to emulate for more reasons than one, and that's Singapore. And let's see if we can actually play this this little cut from Singapore, which I think we may agree, Lacille, that it is a very opportune moment to play this. So, the control room, are we ready with this?
And what brings many countries down, especially in the third world, is that when it comes to selecting the finance minister or the economics minister, they will give their jobs to their brothers, their cousins, their uncles, their relatives, and not to the best people. And Singapore did the exact opposite. It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or a cat is white. If the cat catches mice, it is a good cat. So in the same way, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. If it works, you use it. You're not bound by any ideology. And indeed, what has brought most third world countries down and what has led to their failures in development has been corruption. And so Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, after he became Prime Minister, made it a point to punish not the junior people, but the very senior people. So when a deputy minister went on holiday with his friend, the businessman, when he came back, he was arrested. And so he said, why am I being arrested? He says, you went on a holiday with the businessman, he paid all your expenses, that's corruption. You go to jail. So when a deputy minister is sent to jail, then everybody says, oops, I got to be careful, I can also go to jail. So that honesty factor is one critical reason why Singapore has been exceptionally successful.
That was the good Professor Mahabubai from Singapore, stressing sort of three main reasons why third world countries go down and the secret of success in Singapore. How do you intend addressing the situation in Sri Lanka then?
Yeah, in Sri Lanka now in 2015, right? Actually, now prior to 2015, it was stated that there was corruption, and until the war was ended, you know, everybody again, they accused that they were, you know, even through the war, they were making money. So it came to a situation, corruption has been always there. It came, ultimately, they made all the promises. Like the professor said, what is really important in this country, it is very important that we have to take stern action in order to stop corruption. If you stop corruption, probably increase efficiency and invest all that money for the betterment of the people, I don't think there'll be any problem at all. The problem, biggest problem at the moment right now, people have elected not the right type of good leaders. We need more ethical, moral leaders with integrity. And if we have that kind of leaders, I don't think there'll be no problem to take this country forward. Now, Lee Kuan Yew took firm steps to deal, as he said, with the top, right? Once you start at the top, naturally, down the line, all that will fall in place. There's no problem at all to enforce the rule then.
Don't we need leaders who are committed to policy?
Yeah, because, you know, we have had no policies whatsoever. When you really think of the big picture in this country, we have not had firm policies. All the governments, whatever the policies that they had, whether it is good or bad, actually they changed everything, right? So we need a government which will resolve all the issues by introducing new policies, and they will continue on that basis until such time that country is taken, you know, forward. Policies are a big problem because now, if I may say so, during the last 4 years, now we have had so many higher education ministers, right?
Indeed.
So many higher education ministers, and for that matter again, education ministry was assigned to the highways, right? Which can't happen. Now it is again higher education.
It's a big symbolic.
Yeah, so that's not the way it should be. Basic thing is you have to honor policies, you have to honor, you know, systems, and if possible, unless you do that, I don't think this country can come forward, and I think we are going into a further mess. So which is very important, as you said, very important to introduce policies and go on that basis in the future.
Lacille, Silva, thank you ever so much for being on Newsline Prime. We value your input, and thank you for taking the trouble to research all that. I do hope that Sri Lanka can adopt the Nolan principles
I
in
think-
public life in this country?
I think it's very important, very, very important.
Indeed. Let's see. Let's live with some hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Lacille
very
Silva
much.
for
Thanks a
being
lot.
on Newsline Prime. That's the way it was on Newsline Prime. Have a wonderful evening ahead of you. A splendid weekend. Be safe. And, of course, God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.